And he's like, I've been in love with you forever. And she's like, what?
This is why I love Dramione.
Welcome to Recapping Romantasy, hot takes on hot literature. Who are we?
We are me, Emma.
I am Tabitha.
And I am Maura. Recapping Romantasy contains mature content from fairy smut to dragon rider torture to monster genitalia. Be sure to check the episode notes for content warnings and the link to the transcript. On today's episode, we're going to introduce a mini-series, if you will, called Trope Talk, in which we explore the origins of one particular trope, the books that use it well, and the books where we're supposed to find it but don't. And we'll try to figure out why. So with no further ado...
We were trying to think of how to make smaller episodes that didn't require us to go through 900-page books and keep notes on every single chapter. So
yeah, that's the long and the short of it. So we're going to talk about enemies to lovers today. Essentially, the introduction to enemies to lovers began in, 1813?
The fact that you know that year.
I did, yeah, I looked it up. So Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen first brought us enemies to lovers.
Do you think you could call Gilgamesh and Enkidu enemies to lovers?
I mean...
Yeah, they fight.
Yeah.
Like, physically fight.
I think yes. So here's the deal. Like enemies to lovers is before Pride and Prejudice, I can say. Yeah, I think Pride and Prejudice is just like the first really big, like, this is the thing that modern enemies to lovers branches off of, obviously, right? So Pride and Prejudice was first brought to us as enemies to lovers as satire. It was meant to poke fun at the rigid seriousness of the time in which Jane Austen lived, where courting and coupling was a very political and financial act. This was a time of good matches and fine breeding, where marriage was more about monetary gain than it was about love. You see the opening for Elizabeth Bennet, a girl barely considered a gentleman's daughter, about to be thrown from her home by her father's cousin, and Mr. Darcy, the area's most eligible bachelor, of £10,000 per year, which is an astronomical amount of 2024 money. I wrote like £571,000 in today's money, but I've also seen it, like, depending on how you view economy.
Yeah.
It could be anywhere from like £900,000 to £16 million.
Christ.
And it's just an outlandish figure I cannot fathom as a yearly allowance given via interest.
That's
Yeah, that's not even money that they're making. It's just interest on... Yeah. These two are not meant to be together in any realm of the imagination, right? Which is exactly where the enemies to lovers comes in to smoosh them together and make them kiss.
I wonder if Mr. Darcy would have bought a Cybertruck.
No way.
Probably.
No way.
I bet he would.
Rich people don't know what to do with their money.
He would have bought a hybrid.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just remember I was watching a documentary on capitalism, and they were like, Pride and Prejudice is so unrealistic. There's no way he would have married Elizabeth Bennet. I'm like, yeah, obviously. That's the point of the story.
Yeah. Hey, Prince Harry married Meghan Markle. That could be, modern day.
True. But that's like...
Well, I feel also like that's... A response to that would be, so you agree, men are terrible.
Okay, so let's take a step back for a second and look at the way that romance stories work, right? Like, so there's a really good book on writing romance called Romancing the Beat. And you can quote it saying, whatever is keeping your characters from falling in love is what your book is about, unquote. So in Enemies to Lovers, this then makes the main point of the story, why the two characters hate each other. Like, what is that thing that's keeping them from, respecting them as people? Mm-hmm. And I guess you could say, like, why do we like this? Like, Enemies to Lovers thrives on that tension more than any other romantic trope. Most romance is always, I want to, but I can't because of X. Mm-hmm. X is the obstacle to overcome in order to have love. So X is the tension. Mm-hmm. There's lots of X's out there. You can say societal, cultural, personal ambitions, et cetera, et cetera. Enemies to Lovers is thriving on hatred, which is, I think we can all admit, is immature. Mm-hmm. It's immature, and it's dramatic, and it's messy, and it's unrealistic in daily life, which is why we love it.
I love it.
It's completely unattainable as a romantic structure that lives in fiction only and appeals to the immature drama whore in all of us. So
yeah, see, these two really like Enemies to Lovers, and I have to admit, it is really not one of my favorite tropes.
Sacrilege.
But I don't like it when the two romantic people are mean to each other. I want to read a romance because I want to see two people being nice to each other. So this means the enemies to lovers I enjoy tend to be ones where it's an outside factor affecting how they interact with each other. Usually something like class, that they have to, like, it's never at any point in doubt that they like each other. It's just this other thing that's impeding them.
So I would argue, though, that the really good enemies to lovers never gets into that realm that you're talking about, like where you're mean to each other for no good reason, right?
That's
Like,
what so much of it is.
I know.
though.
So this is where we're going to talk about how people get it wrong all the time, like how authors fuck up enemies to lovers, which I think is a good majority of the time. I really think it's a hard trope to write.
I don't know if I've ever actually read enemies to lovers.
Yeah.
Like now after, I mean, going through your notes and stuff, I am like, I don't know if I think I've just read dislike to like, which is, you know, we'll get into later.
Yeah.
When I was going through examples, I was trying to think of one example that I've read where they were actually on opposing sides or you know, in that sense, but there was really none. Kind of one, which I mentioned, but
yeah, there's a lot of, I think, poorly written enemies to lovers out there. And I think it can be really problematic after a while that you've read so many bad enemies to lovers because, I mean, it really does. It can cast the men as abusive and it can cast the women as doormats real fast if you don't do it right.
Yeah, like all those mafia romances.
Oh, yeah, mafia romance is one of
God.
them for sure. Like, you have to be really careful about the line that you're walking.
They're all just abusive assholes. I've read so many of them. I'm like, how would we like this at all, guys?
And that's, I mean, personally, if someone is mean to me, we're done.
Yeah.
We're done. Like,
Yeah.
maybe with a lot of groveling, we could ever possibly be friends or be cool in any way. But, like, it's just a hard no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was told once that, you know, if boys are mean to you, that means they like you. And I listened to that for one moment, and then I said, fuck that. And so any boy who was mean to me, I was immediately mean back to them.
Which is the way it should be.
Yeah,
See,
but
that's how I feel at my least charitable, is that the reason that enemies to lovers is so popular amongst heterosexual women is because heterosexual women are trying to reinterpret the fact that straight men are often mean to them as they actually do like me. They're just being mean for reasons.
Well, see, and that's I think a part of the problem with enemies to lovers written poorly is like enemies to lovers has to have a reason why they're enemies. It's not that just they don't like each other or they're being mean to you. They're just being mean to you.
Yeah.
I'm
Also,
sorry.
Again, the dislike to like is I think where that is. It's most just they're mean to each other and then they somehow overcome this like bad enemies to lovers. Like, you're just a bully to me and now I like you. Or we weren't ever on opposing sides. You were just like, I read this one, I guess maybe I could have added this, but I don't remember the title. But they were like neighbors and they like, you know, were loud and they hated it and because they shared, you know, a bedroom wall. And then they were like bitchy to each other and then eventually, you know, they became lovers. But I was like, you guys are just fucking assholes to each other.
Yeah, that's not
Like
enemies to lovers.
antagonizing, yeah.
There's
like
no
what
like
I do to my downstairs neighbors.
right. There's no good reason, and that's where enemies to lovers really shines. There has to be a good concrete reason why you're enemies. It can't just be because you're both assholes,
Right.
or because one of you is an asshole and the other one of you is just a doormat and will take it.
Yeah.
Like that's not enemies to lovers.
No.
So
Not a good relationship.
yeah, so the way that like authors fuck up enemies to lovers, I think, is generally in that overexcitement. Like I think a lot of people will shove a boatload of traction between these characters, but then they don't spend enough time building the personal structures that keep the characters at odds. So a lot of people are like, oh, we're so attracted to each other, but we can't be together for dumb reasons.
Yeah.
And so then, you know, readers get annoyed by that.
I think a lot of authors too focus on like sexy banter. Like they really want to play into that, like they're bantering with each other and
Antagonistic, sexy
yeah,
banter.
yeah, and like denying their attraction. They're just hiding it, and it's like, again, if somebody spoke to me like that,
Yeah.
So I mean, and then like personality problems that are too quickly corrected without necessary work done by the characters, the conflict will fall straight on its face and it stops being enemies to lovers, right? We also have to take into account that the characters are warring over something and how to keep, you know, that abusive territory out of the situation. There's a really good example, I think, in Pride and Prejudice. Like, Pride and Prejudice is the metric, right? This is like where it exceeds all expectations.
Yeah.
Because like Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet are at odds for good personality reasons and also external reasons. Societal reasons keep them apart. He has a shit ton of money. She is 2 steps away from destitution, basically.
They have reason to believe the worst about each other.
Yeah, they have reason to believe the worst. Like, he's like, she's just some pissant girl from like some podunk town, and I, Mr. Darcy,
city boy with money.
Yeah, you're right. And she's like, oh, well, he's just...
Well, she's like
a condescending asshole.
Yeah.
When they're both kind of right is the thing about it, right?
Yeah, and she's like, I don't even want to marry the like weirdo I'm related to who's here talking about potatoes. I definitely don't want to marry the guy who's talked shit about my sisters.
Yeah, exactly. So, and he does terrible things, right? Like he makes Jane's life a living hell.
Yeah.
He takes Bingley away from her with like basically all the reasons he shouldn't be interested in Elizabeth himself, right? And then
I love that part when he shows up like sweaty at her house and is like, you suck so hard, but I'm so into it. And then is like confused when she's mad.
I know. It's so great. I love everything about it. And it's just such a great example. And
I'm trying to think of what that scene, because you're talking about the BBC version.
Oh, both of them.
Yeah, both of them. It's when,
but he doesn't really show up to her house in the 2005 version.
Well, yeah, it's when
until Bingley does. I mean, at the end.
Well, it's that time when he shows up and he's like, I'm like obsessed with you and I want to marry you. And she was like, you can fuck all the way off.
Yeah, that's the BBC version.
Yeah.
Like in the 2005,
isn't that the
it's out in the rain. Yeah, it's way more
Oh,
romantic. He's like, I'm so in love with you. And she's
it.
like, what the hell?
Yeah.
I was going to say, is he less sweaty in that one?
He's wet.
No, but he's soaking wet.
I've watched the BBC one way more.
Wow.
Yeah, same. I the BBC one is something I watch almost every year, I have to admit. So, but no, the thing that he does though, like, because there's like this moment in Enemies to Lovers usually where there has to be like a grand gesture of this, like, I am so sorry that I was this way.
Yeah.
Now that we're on the same page, there has to be amends. You know, Mr. Darcy does a good job of it, like basically like making everything right with her sister.
Yeah.
Fixing everything with Lydia.
Yeah.
Paying off Wickham. He does literally everything. Like monetary, societally, I'm sorry. He like apologizes to her. He asks for his and then he asks her father for her hand in marriage. He's just like, listen, I was a complete ass.
And her dad's like, what happened here?
I know. And they're just like, I heard you. Bring in Elizabeth. I need to talk to her about this.
I do think it was the stuff with Lydia that really pushed it over the edge too, because the stuff that he did with, was the older sister, Jane?
Yeah, Jane's older.
Yeah.
That's just what he should have done. That's like the lowest bar.
Yeah.
But with the stuff with Lydia, it's like an acknowledgement that like, I know your family's fucked up, but I also know that they're not like terrible people.
Right.
And
because that was one of the points that he made when he was like, I love you most ardently, but your family fucking sucks, bro.
And
I she's like,
I
double
feel like
finger.
I feel like this is his way of acknowledging, like, I know your family is not like at the level that mine is, but that doesn't mean that they don't.
Yeah, they don't have value.
Yeah,
exactly.
They deserve like
so I'm gonna
respect.
help smooth this over.
Right, exactly. Especially since he's in love with her, he has to like bring himself
most ardently
to say good things about her.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's just an amazing example of enemies to lovers, and everything that attempts to be enemies to lovers has to at least aim towards that bar.
Yeah.
If you can't even aim at that bar, I'm sorry, it's not. Or it's like it tried and it fell way short. But other examples, I mean, let's talk about Bride by Ali Hazelwood for a sec.
So good.
We're going to get into Bride in another podcast, so we're not going to talk about it too much. But like, okay, so here's what makes it a pretty good enemies to lovers example. Like, we've got werewolves, we've got vampires. They've been warring for 500 years. So you've got a pretty good line in the sand there. Centuries of enemies. They've been warring. They don't know really even why at this point, but can they broker a truce through marriage? Yeah. Even though all other attempts at brokering truces through marriage have like basically ended in death. Yeah. So like, can these two fall in love? Can they do it? And it's like, the answer is yes, they fucking can.
And they do so beautifully.
Now,
not to give away the end.
Yeah, but. So I think there are some caveats there. They have to learn to trust each other, and there is like a he falls first situation. But the same thing with Darcy, he falls first too, right? Yeah. So I think it does a really good job in that way.
I'm sorry, I just got the most. I wonder if there's an Omegaverse Pride and Prejudice fanfiction out there.
Oh, absolutely. I found one that's called like Dragons and Darcy or something.
I need to go look it up right now. I can't wait for this podcast to be I'm just kidding. I love talking with you guys.
Okay. Okay. Now it's Tabitha's turn. Give us a couple of examples.
Give us one.
So I'm afraid mine might fall a little more into the star-crossed area, but again, it's what I like, where two people like very clearly like each other, and they're like, God damn it, I have like every reason that I should not like you.
Yeah.
So the first one is The Queer Principles of Kit Webb by Cat Sebastian. It's set in the 1700s. Kit is an ex-highwayman who owns a coffee shop, which hooray for the coffee shop AU, and he's kind of bored by it. Percy is an aristocrat. I think he's going to be an earl one day, but he recently learned that he's technically illegitimate. His father was married to someone else before he married his mom and never got divorced.
Messy.
So long story short, he wants to steal something from his father and he wants to hire Kit to do it.
Okay.
You find out throughout the story that Kit grew up in the district that was under the control of this earl and has several reasons to like seriously hardcore dislike him, thus also Percy. But he actually likes Percy. Like on a personal level, he really, really likes him, but he just hates the title and the ruling class in general. It's very anti-aristocracy, this book.
Right up your alley.
I love it.
I would say all, or at least most, of Cat Sebastian's books are like this. The characters like each other, but the conflict is over class differences. This gap is bridged by the person who is more upper class doing something that brings themselves down to more equal footing. Like Percy basically stops living as an aristocrat in this story. Highly recommend. Great
So he
book.
like abdicates the aristocracy.
Kind of. He lets the information come out about his family, but by that point he's already like made a bunch of moves and invested stuff and sold off properties and whatnot. So
Yeah, it's a big move.
So the next one, very similar. It's called The Magpie Lord by K.J. Charles. This author's very similar in that class issues are usually the biggest concern. I think this is the only one of her series that are supernatural, maybe a couple others. So it's set in Victorian England, where there is a small secret community of magic users. A new, again, earl, I believe, gets cursed and needs a magician. And this magician, Stephen, removes it for him. However, Stephen's father was ruined by this lord's father. And this lord basically agrees that his father was a dick. So this story is about them essentially trying to figure out who put this curse on them, how to resolve it and whatnot. And again, it's like they like each other despite the fact they have every reason not to.
So it's like people who could be enemies but aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like they understand on like a rational level that they should hate this person, but they can't bring themselves to do it.
I see. That's along your lines of your where I think that you can handle the trope. Yeah.
Yeah.
And very similar, I would say, is Carry On by Rainbow Rowell, which is, I call it the book exclusively made for fan fiction. A lot of people say that it was originally Harry Potter fan fiction, and like I see the parallels, but I can't quite figure out who the characters are supposed to be.
I don't even know what this book is.
It's very obvious that the main characters are parallels to Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy.
Dreary.
But neither of the characters is actually like those people. Like one of them's an orphan, but he's also a huge dumb himbo.
Yeah.
So Harry Potter.
Yeah.
He's an orphan.
Yeah.
He's
himbo.
kind of a himbo.
Kind of a himbo. Yeah.
A different kind of himbo,
Okay.
different breed of himbo, I'd say.
Fine.
Yeah.
And the other guy, Basil, is a rich kid.
So Draco.
Yeah, but he's also a vampire who's trying essentially not to be a vampire.
So Draco.
He's got black hair though.
Fine.
Oh, okay. So she gave him a different hairstyle.
Yeah,
That's
so
fine.
it's very Allie Hazelwood of her. This is not
The 3 books in these series are very character motivated. They have very, very little plot. But it's funny because they're roommates.
And they were roommates.
And they hate each other, but they hate each other in this like really intense, obsessive way. Simon would always go to Basil's like soccer games and like stare at him and be like, I'm just waiting for him to do something vampire-y.
Yeah.
And it's like his girlfriend at the time was like, yeah, but you go to all of his games.
Yeah. It's like maybe think about that critically.
I love that you're bringing this up because I'm about to talk about fan fiction.
Please do.
Yeah. So those are my 3 examples.
Take it into fan fiction, Emma. Let's do it.
So, speaking of Harry Potter fan fiction, we all know I'm a big fan of Dramione in quite a phase, a couple year long phase, to be honest. But that little like he obsessively hates them is what I love about Dramione. There's a lot of like retcon that happens in the fan fiction where basically like Draco's family or his friends are like, dude, we knew you had a crush on Hermione. Like you were obsessive about how she was like that fucking mudblood, like that sort of shit, like all the time.
Yeah.
Like that happens all the time. But in the Dramione that I like, most of it's like AU and they're older. So like the enemies thing has already happened, but they both have like this bad blood that they have to like get out. They're like, I forgive you, but like you're still a fucking ass.
Those are my favorite Hermione fan fictions. The ones that are like years outside of school and they're like, God damn, I hated you when we were kids.
Yeah. But man, you got long fingers and you smirk and
it's like always was kind of attracted despite the fact that I hated you.
And then on the other kind of enemies to lovers would be in quarantine, I read quite a lot of Kylo Ren Rey fan fiction, which is the newest Star Wars, if you don't know. And within like Star Wars, I guess you could say that they're enemies to lovers. I mean, they're
No, they
very
totally
much
are.
enemies.
Yeah, they're
but
on
then
different sides of the Force.
It's absolutely enemies to
yeah,
lovers.
just the whole thing was written bad. Like
It was
the second
poorly
movie,
done,
the
yeah.
second movie set it up so beautifully.
did.
They like touch each other across the Force, and there's a really great fan fiction where that happens. There's a lot of fan fiction.
No, I mean it's
happen.
absolutely 100% enemies to lovers story.
Yeah.
It's just that they couldn't like dedicate themselves to the romance part because
Which
they
is
were too
crazy
busy
because
like
Star Wars is
because
like
a man
space
wrote it.
I
soap
know,
opera.
I know. Men can't do this. I'm sorry.
No,
All men out there,
but-
just stop
but-
it. Stop before you can like ruin it.
The man who there was what's his name? Who cares? There's some guy who wrote the first one and the last one, and then whoever wrote Knives Out wrote the second one.
Okay.
That's why it's like so vastly different.
Right. I know the
And then
second
they
one was
retconned
different.
everything in the third one.
Yes.
And I'm like, you guys ruined it.
Yeah.
But most of the Reylo fan fiction that I've read is AU. The ones that are like in universe rewrite basically all of the third one, and they're so unbelievably long. Like I read one that was longer than War and Peace.
Oh my god.
I'm not kidding.
I won't read fan fiction if it's over like 75,000
Listen,
words.
I had nothing to do during quarantine.
That's
like-
fine. That's
Were you
fair.
a teacher at the time?
Yeah. And there was a lot of classes where I just taught to students, and it was just all black screens, and I ended the class with like and subscribe. And we played a lot of what was that game that was really popular with the little like you're in space? Among Us. How did I forget that?
Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we played that a lot, and they're like, "Is this allowed?" I'm like, "Shut up, don't tell."
This is why none of the kids can read now.
I luckily wasn't teaching them how to read.
Oh my god, we found the source.
Emma. It's me. Yeah. But like besides that, like I have a mislabeled example that we'll talk about in a second, but I don't really think I've truly read any real fan fiction besides Pride and Prejudice. Well, I've read lots of fan fiction. I mean, I've never read good enemies to lovers.
It's hard to
Just
find.
a lot of
Yeah,
stuff
it's hard
that's
to find.
labeled enemies to
It's
lovers, and I
labeled.
don't think it is.
Well,
I think they're all either star-crossed lovers or it's a dislike to like.
It is.
Which
yeah.
I'm like, that's not the same.
I also think a big problem is that if a book is advertising itself as enemies to lovers, it's kind of a red flag because no book should be just a trope, just one trope.
I would love it if that were the case. It's just really boiled down to tropes these days. Like,
Yeah.
what kind of tropes do you have in this book?
Yeah.
And like, I think it's really gotten to a point with writers now where you really do like aim for a trope. Like, I'm gonna write an enemies to lovers that has forced proximity, one bed.
One bed.
I've got
He falls
and
first.
like
I'd probably like it. I mean, but
well, it's easy to
where's
pitch.
the plot?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
a
These
super
are just
easy pitch.
Why are these things coming up? you
yeah,
know?
these are all just like elements of a story you should already
Yeah.
have that has like a greater plot.
Yeah, if you're able to tag your story like a AO3 fic, I'm a little
Yeah.
worried.
Well, I think a lot of it has become AO3. Like,
I
you should be
know.
able to tag it so I know exactly what's in here. So I'll pick it up.
But I kind of like being surprised.
Yeah, I know. I do too. But also, I'm not against the tropification of fiction for genre fiction, especially.
No, I like the tropes as tropes as like
Yeah.
one part of a larger story.
Yeah.
But if it's all it is, there's
Oh
just
no,
no
there has to
substance
be way
it.
more to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it can't just be this is an enemies to lovers story. Full stop. There has
Yeah.
to be more.
Agreed.
Let's get to a mislabeled example, which is
Okay.
really one of my favorites, which is ACOTAR. Can I talk about ACOTAR for a second?
Please.
Yeah. So most of this is like a court of Mist and Fury, because let's talk about Rhys and Feyre. That's not enemies to
I'm
lovers.
sorry, do you mean Reese?
Shut up. Reese, not Rhys. Reese.
Say it how you want. It's
Okay, let's just start over.
I pronounce a word wrong every time we talk, and I feel so dumb because you're like, "Did you mean this?"
Oh, like
So-
when you said host repeatedly.
So the fact that someone else.
So, I mean, a common enemies to lovers fail is when the MC hates the love interest, but the love interest has always been in love with them. They just didn't know it. This is called pining. It's not enemies to lovers.
Pining.
So, and that's great. I love pining too. That's wonderful. There's a place for that. I will read a pining novel. I will be happy with it. It is going to be great.
I enjoy pining a lot more when they're like already
Me
friends,
too.
though.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a lot. Like, I really like it when it starts when they're like really young and they know each other since
Yeah.
childhood.
Oh, yeah.
And then they don't see each other for a long time.
Yes.
And then they meet again and maybe like they don't really know each other all that well, but they've been like in love with them this entire time since they were children. And like there's hatred there though, because there's like a problem that they have to get over. And he's like, I've been in love with you forever. And she's like, what?
This is why I love Dramione.
If you like pining since childhood, I highly recommend Steve Rogers' Bucky Barnes.
Back to ACOTAR. Okay, so also hate the love for Feyre, and he falls first for Rhys, right? So that's what we're dealing with there. That is not enemies to lovers.
No.
But you want to know, like the hot take on have on this is that who qualifies for enemies to lovers is Tamlin and
I think
Feyre.
you're right.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
it is. It's Tamlin and Feyre. Sorry, guys.
No, you're right. It doesn't hit though because she eventually falls out.
Of course, yeah. It doesn't hit because at the end she's like, dude, no.
And he's so boring.
And he's very boring.
white
But
bread.
yeah, but it's totally enemies to lovers because she's like, I hate fairies. And he's like, you know what? Humans are really actually very annoying. And I really wish I didn't have to do this. Yet here you are.
Yeah.
Does that mean that Beauty and the Beast is the OG enemies to lovers?
Oh. No,
I don't think so.
No, because I'm thinking back to that one.
It would be different if in the original
He wasn't
Beauty
human.
and the Beast, yeah, since he's human, he has all the reason in the world.
And also in like the
yeah.
one that I watched from like the 18, it wasn't really like the 18, but it was in black and white and it was so funny.
Yeah.
But he's like cordial to her. He's like, you like, I know you hate me, but you have to come to dinner every night.
Yeah.
Like it's part of the rules.
It's
like,
just
I don't want
to
you to get hurt, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could say it's a he falls first type ish, but
Yeah, it's more of a recent Feyre.
yeah,
I think the original OG Beauty and the Beast.
because he knows from the beginning that he has to love her. I mean, I guess Tamlin's like that too, but
Tamlin does, but he
Tamlin
fights
also
it.
hates her.
Yeah, he also hates her because like all the reasons you're just a puny little human.
Yeah. Weak. My mislabeled example is from Blood and Ash. This one's like kind of weird. When Hawk / spoiler Castile and Poppy meet, they just hate each other. Like Poppy's like this maiden who's like kind of a holy person. It's bizarre. And Hawk is just a guard in the army, and he has to like protect her. And she's like, dude, fucking leave me alone. Like you're annoying and like smarmy, and I'm sick of your attitude, and you keep being in my presence and leave. And then you find out at the end, this is where like it gets enemies to lovers, if you will. Like they've already fallen in love now from dislike to like. And then it's revealed that Hawk is actually this guy Castile, who's the dark one, who's like this evil, the prince of the evil company.
So it gives them enemies to lovers maybe in the second one?
Yeah, and in the second one it starts off and
Okay.
like she fucking hates him, and
Yeah.
she's like, how dare you lie to me?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he's like, dude, calm down, it's not that big of a deal. Like the country that you're a part of is fucked up, man, and we're actually the good people. But like, so you could say maybe there it becomes enemies to lovers again, or not again, but finally.
Or maybe it gives it a better reason to
but-
be enemies to lovers.
But he still loves her. And
Okay.
very quickly in the second book, she's like, I'm learning more about your world. I'm learning more about your people.
Okay.
You're right. The people that I was like this weird, like Virgin Mary type for, they were actually the evil people.
Okay, so recent Feyre.
Yeah. So, I have not read the rest of them, so maybe it becomes enemies to lovers or something again and again, but who knows? So.
It's the only way you can keep it fresh. Is just keep on enemies
keep
lovering
doing it again. Reveal number 2.
Okay.
The worst examples, Maura.
Okay, so the worst examples for me, well, the main one that I'm going to tell you about is Fourth Wing. Let's just talk about Xaden and Violet for a second. This was set up perfectly to be enemies to lovers, with Xaden on the side of the rebels and Violet as the daughter of the general who killed his dad. Perfect. Great external reason to hate each other.
Yep.
And then there could be great internal reasons to hate each other, right? Like you're going to be making decisions that based on your knowledge of the world, etc. But the choices the book makes never lets it truly become an enemies to lovers story. It drags it out, first of all. We never really see any of that like enemiesness because they're on the same side essentially.
Yeah,
right?
they're
She
just,
doesn't really
like,
know what
dicks.
he's up to.
They're just being dicks to each
I
other.
was just gonna say, like, they're just dicks. That's
on top
it.
of that, like she's still like, this guy's hot.
Yeah,
I could
right?
sit there and watch him fight all day and I don't masturbate about it at night. Like, you know?
Yeah.
It never really gets there for me. And then like it never fully defines why they're enemies in the first place. Like can never really get into that until well past the
why
point
would
that it
you
matters.
if you like world building is fake? You don't need to do it.
So I think this could have been a really, really, really good
Yes.
story for enemies to lovers, but it's just like it just fell on its face because I think it was just poorly done. And then Iron Flame comes along and just undercuts it completely and turns it into a bodyguard romance.
Yeah. Because he's doing it as a deal to her mom.
And again, bodyguard romances have their place. I would read one.
I love those too.
It's just not in enemies to lovers.
No.
I'm sorry.
Which is what that series was billed as, basically. Enemies to lovers.
Yeah.
So
100%.
bait and switch.
Yeah, it was absolutely bait and switch.
Dislike to like.
Yeah.
All right, so the one that I thought of for an example of enemies to lovers done badly is The Captive Prince by C.S. Packet. Is that how you say that?
I've never read that book.
Pacat, maybe.
So it's not actually a bad book. Like, it is well written. I know there's a lot of people who love this series. I think that's totally fair. But to me personally, I really struggled through the first book and could not read the other ones because it was so incredibly dark.
Yeah.
The issues that make them enemies in this story are there's like warring kingdoms, there's sexual assault, there's literal enslavement, and they seem insurmountable.
Yeah.
Like at the end, they're both like leaders of these different countries. At the end, I feel like the most that they could do when the conflict finishes is have a professional respect for each other. Like, that was a fucked up thing that we both just had to go through. I wish you well, but let us never look at each other ever again. So a romance, it just was not a story that felt like it should be a romance to me.
Yeah, I have to say a lot of the Dramione fanfiction out there, like the dark stuff. So like Manacled is this Dramione fanfic where it is like Handmaid's Tale, Voldemort wins. Like, it's some fucked up shit happens. I've never read it. I've seen it all over TikTok. I will probably end up reading it one day, but it's one of those things where like in the enemy's part, he has to do some fucked up shit to her. And there's a lot of Dramione, like the dark Dramione that's like that. Like Voldemort wins, he has to do so much fucked up shit for her, to her, in order to, you know, quote unquote, protect her in this time. And it's like, how do you fall in love with someone who does that shit to you? Or like, even if you love them before and then you're in this situation, like, I mean, again, I've not been in that situation, but I don't know if I could deal with that. Like, you actually physically hurting me, abusing me this way in multiple ways. Like, how do I then continue to love you?
And it not being like really consensual. Like, you basically have to agree to it so you don't get killed.
Yes. A lot of it's like dub-con, non-con stuff, and I'm just like, ew.
I think that's
no
like
thanks.
a totally different genre problem that is more like, you know, horror romance almost.
Mafia shit is like that.
And I think that's the problem I had with The Captive Prince is I felt like the reason I read it is because people were just like lumping it in with like gay fantasy romance. And so I'm like, okay, I keep seeing it, I'll read it. And nobody warned me it was going to be as dark as it was.
Well, I mean, if it's going to be that dark, and again, like I was talking about with Enemies to Lovers, one of the very important points is that they have to make amends at the end. So how do you make amends with another person after you've done that to them the entirety of the story? Like, is that realistic?
Not
or
to
does
me.
it make the person falling in love with the main antagonist or love interest, as it is in this book, does it make them look like a doormat at the end? Or like they're so broken that they have no other option but to just stay in that abusive cycle. So then you're like, that's really fucked up. So, I mean, nothing against people who like to read that. Read it all you like. But for me personally, I think that's where like the enemies to lovers kind of falls apart.
Well, I think this is just a product of, as you said, the genreification of fiction. Because if people weren't just like, oh yeah, it's a romance, it's an enemies to lovers romance, and they're like, actually, one person literally enslaves the other and tortures him for sexual pleasure in front of other people.
Sorry, my face is horrified. You can't see it.
Dude, there's child molestation in this book too.
What? No,
and not as like a good thing. You like find out it happened to one of the characters, and that's why he's the way he is.
Oh,
but
that's God. Okay.
Still super fucked up.
Thank you.
Pass. That's on my no list.
So I mean, there are dark things that I think are perfectly acceptable to explore in fiction, but it's like also, do we need to have a romance part of that?
And when you say this is the one thing this book is, it is not doing the reader or the author justice.
Exactly. Enemies to lovers is a romance trope. That's what it's there for.
We like
so
it, we don't like
I mean,
it.
you can call it an enemies to lovers kind of, but it's not. I don't know. I think it has to be. There are rules.
So celebrate tropes, but don't use them as tools to define works.
And you know, if you're gonna write an enemies to lovers, do it right.
If you have any good enemies to lovers fan fictions and or published books,
I will take all the Dramionies out there. Give them to me.
Put it in let us know. Email us or talk to us on TikTok, recap.romantasy, or recappingromantasy on Instagram, or you can message us on Spotify. There's like a Q&A thing, or I don't know.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.